Chase, welcome to the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. What's going on, dude?
Thank you so much for having me. Doing well, doing really well, staying busy.
Yeah, so you are a traveling nurse. Tell us a little bit about what that entails.
Yeah, so I've been a nurse since 2015. Did psych nursing and then in emergency department nursing, and I started that last January. So it's been about a year now, and for the most part, it's about 13-week contracts. You I can pretty much pick. I mean, the need for nursing is so in such a high demand right now that
Yeah.
I can pretty much like just name a spot and I have a good chance of getting in there. But I mean, but I'm also not super picky. Like I don't really have much of an agenda as far as where I want to go. It's just I find a good spot. So I went to Charleston, South Carolina for 6 months last year, and then I came out to Colorado, and it's just a great way to see the country and be able to work, do things I love.
Yeah, it's amazing. It sounds like it's super fun and would just be a great opportunity to have if you're single and just
Yep.
and so that's great, man. And so but you're also, parlaying that with health coaching. So tell us a little bit about what that entails.
Yeah. So that just started back in 2020. I started that after my own health journey, and I know we can chat about that a little bit if you'd like to, um,
Absolutely.
but I got into health coaching, and now I'm, just working on trying to find that equal balance. I love coaching, I love nursing, so it's kind of like working that fine line in between the two. And I'm blessed to have a schedule with nursing that's only 3 12-hour shifts a week, so it allows me 4 days a week to really contribute, fully to coaching. And I love coaching, and people have asked me if I'm going to eventually leave nursing or whatnot, and I really don't know yet. I'm
Yeah.
just kind of we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, I guess the logical next step is for us to discuss what got you into coaching in the first place. And obviously, you have your own health transformation. So let's dive into that a little bit and tell us about, what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so the really condensed version here, and we can expand if we need to. But um, I've always been the heavier kid growing up. I've always, even into my teenage years, I just continued to put on the weight. I tried all the different diets, the fad diets, you name them, and just nothing ever seemed to work. I thought, I was the problem, that I just, everyone could lose these weight, lose all those weight on all these diets that are out there. You see the commercials for like, so and so lost, 100 pounds doing this diet. And so I feel like, oh, I can do that and lose the weight. And then if it didn't work, I felt like I was the problem, not the diet.
Can I interject here for a
Yeah.
second and jump in and ask some questions? Because I'm curious. So when you were growing up, when did you know you had a weight problem?
Gosh, it was pretty early. I can't put a number or like an age on it, but it was, I mean, in my childhood, I mean, I always knew, I mean, I have to buy the bigger clothes, or, things weren't fitting
Hmm.
right. I started having those kind of like, self-conscious, like body image concerns. And I mean, just, I mean, my family was always like, they were never like, no one in my family was ever like, like, hey, you need to lose weight. But I mean, as I started to get older, those conversations started to come up. But even before then, like, I would get little remarks here or there from friends or maybe some family
Yeah.
members, and not out of like being mean or anything like that at all, but just like, comments that, oh, you're getting bigger, every year at Christmas time,
Mm.
I'd see family. And, you know, it, it, it was hard to kind of hear that stuff. And I never really kind of processed it until I started to get, probably into my teenage years, but definitely experienced that younger.
What do you think were some of the behaviors that contributed to your weight gain when you were young? I mean, was it, the example your parents were setting, or the people that the friends that you had, or just kind of the food that was in the house? Like, what do you think was the kind of the main contributors?
Besides, I mean, we really didn't have a ton of like junk food, I'm putting air quotes, in the house, but like,
Hmm.
I look back, and one of the times I was able to really identify where it started to become a big problem was like right around the time when I started to be able to drive on my own, getting the independence. I could swing through any drive-through I wanted. I could stop at
Yeah.
any store that I wanted, and no one would have a clue that I did. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I kind of started getting to that downward spiral, that like once I felt like I was really struggling, I just to kind of heck with it and just kept eating badly.
Yeah. And so you obviously were gaining weight, and so kind of how long did that happen, and when did you decide to make change?
Yeah. So I started this health journey back in 2019. It was January 1st. Just prior to the new year, one of my coworkers at the time that I worked with at the mental health hospital, she challenged me to a weight loss challenge. And she was just like, let's see what happens. We can compete and we're like setting goals for each other and like just trying to like make it fun out of some sort and just more accountability. And honestly, I did not think it was going to be anything different compared to any other diet I tried in the past. I thought it was just going to be like, okay, sure, let's do this for a month and then just kind of say heck with it. Like just like everything else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but we stuck with it. And at that time, I was 382 pounds, and we got started, and it just continued. Just that first month, I lost about 30 pounds. Now, a lot of that I know now was water weight, but
Sure.
I was able to lose a lot of
That's
weight
still
right in the first
incredible.
month. Yeah, and it was very inspiring and motivating for me to continue going. It's like, oh, I'm seeing the results, and also had a ton of accountability from my friend that was challenging me. But also, like once I started being a little more open about me trying to lose weight, friends and family were very supportive of all that, and I just continued to keep going.
So what were you doing? What were you specifically doing? Obviously, you guys were challenging each other, and so like, what was the diet aspect or the exercise aspect of it that started to drive and move the needle?
Yeah. So when I first started, speaking of like fad diets, I started doing intermittent fasting when I very first started this journey
Okay.
back in 2019, just because that was like the kind of the thing on the top of my mind at the moment. That year
Yeah.
was like, all right, that's going to be the thing that's going to help me do this. That was back when I thought you had to do a fad diet to be able to lose some type of weight. Um,
Totally.
and so it started with intermittent fasting. I was doing a lot of clean eating, just really cutting out any type of junk food, any type of like liquid calories like soda.
Uh-huh.
And I started going to the gym. I was primarily doing cardio, about 30 minutes or so, or sometimes even longer, about 5 days a week. And I started doing a little bit of strength training just with like the machines. When I started the gym, they did a very
Had you
basic,
ever done any type of strength training before?
very little bit. Back when I was in high school, I went to one of the local fitness centers, and I had tried it a little bit, but that was one of those years that just didn't stick, and I just kind of gave up on it after a month or two. I
And what type of intermittent fasting were you doing? You were doing like 16/8 every day,
think it was
or
16/8.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then you're seeing the needle move like big time, 30 pounds in the first month. You're obviously feeling super motivated. I'm sure people are commenting. You're like, yeah, this is
Mhm.
actually like working out really well. And so tell us more how the process went.
Yeah. So I, after probably about 2, 3 months or so, I was like, all right. So that was when I started to learn more. I started following like the right kind of people on Instagram and such, and started really like learning more about what a calorie deficit was. And that's what's required for fat loss. So it doesn't
Yeah.
require intermittent fasting or keto or Weight Watchers or anything special. It's like literally if you just count your calories and you make sure you're in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. And so I stopped intermittent fasting because I'm a huge breakfast person. So that was already like kind of going against me, just like someone who loves carbs trying to do keto. Um, it just wasn't going to
Totally.
work for me. So I stopped with intermittent fasting. And then it was about in April or so, I met up with a guy on Instagram. Shout out to Josh Pierce. Him and I worked together later on that year, but we met back in April. He started to kind of really give me a lot of guidance and direction as far as like what to expect next. And he started, he offered his coaching services to me. And at first, I was like, okay, I'm doing okay still. I'm, needle still moving really fast without any like.
So you were okay. So at what point was this and how much had you lost when you started to come to the realization? You started to follow people on Instagram, started to understand that it's more about a calorie deficit, and kind of started to tune into what's really necessary.
Probably about 50 to 60 ish pounds by like April or so, or maybe, or no, probably middle March.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 3 months and you're down about 50 pounds. That's incredible. And so, do you have
Yeah.
any idea how many calories you were eating at the time? Like with the intermittent fasting, obviously that was the way to help you restrict calories.
Yeah. When I first started counting calories back in about April or so, I was actually only eating about 12 to 1400 calories a day.
Yeah.
Um,
And what do you think? So now that you understand calories, what do you think you were eating prior to going on to that intermittent fasting diet?
like before I started the
Yeah,
journey
yeah.
at
Before you
all.
started dieting, yeah, at all.
Oh, geez. oh, way too much. I mean,
Obviously. Yeah.
yeah, I had a really bad binge eating history and bad relationship with food, and like trying to eat in secrecy. Like I mean, gosh, I mean, I look back, at some of the things that I would eat. It was just, it's embarrassing, honestly. But like I would go through like a McDonald's drive-through, and it was like two McDoubles, two McChickens, a large
Mm-hmm.
fry, and a soda. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
a snack for me. Like that was like, oh, I'm gonna go through the drive-through before I go home and actually have dinner. What my family's prepared for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it was bad. It was really bad around that time.
Yeah, that's incredible that you just kind of flipped the switch and like I'm going to make a change and then rode with the momentum. And I'm sure there've been, and we'll talk about this a little bit. I'm sure there've been plenty of trials and tribulations in between, but just getting back to kind of your journey so far is, so we're several months in, you're seeing big changes, you're starting to really start to understand and want to learn more about nutrition, and you get a coach at some point.
Yeah. So kind of before I even got the coach, so I reached my 100 pounds lost by the end of May that
Wow,
year. So less than five
that
months.
is aggressive.
Yeah, I had lost 100 pounds. So again, and this, for anyone listening, like that's totally not the norm. Like, and also like to remind people, I was 382 pounds. Like I wasn't, just 150 pounds trying to lose 5, 10 pounds. Like I had the weight to lose. So it's going to make it a lot easier for it to come off, especially when I was doing the aggressive things I was. And I look back at them and I know they're aggressive now, but back then I just thought it was like a regular like diet, and that's what I was supposed to be doing.
Sure.
So I didn't really know that I was being that aggressive at the time. Um, and so fast forward, through the summer, things were still going well. And then about late summer, beginning of fall, I started really noticing a plateau, so to speak. And that's when I started, I was trying different, I was like, do I need to change things up? Like what's not working? And that's when that's when Josh reached out to me and he was like, hey, like, we're gonna have to, get you out of this calorie deficit. Like you're starting
So
to
you
get
think you were
adapted.
still eating around 12, 1400, and things had stagnated. Like
Yeah.
nothing's changing, getting
Yeah.
frustrated. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was time he's like, we need to start getting out of the calorie deficit and take your body up to maintenance for just a little bit of time. And he was like, I'd love to help you through that if you want to start working together. And that's when I signed up to work with him. It was in August of 2019.
Tell us a little bit about, I don't mean to keep
No, you're fine.
interrupting you, but this is like, I think there's so many salient points here that I think where we can bridge the gap between sort of conventional wisdom around dieting and the science of nutrition and weight change and weight loss and metabolism, as you said, and you kind of alluded to. Okay, you'd been in this seemingly aggressive, which obviously for you was an extremely aggressive deficit for a
Mm-hmm.
period of time. You did fantastic progress. And so then you reach out to this coach and he's expressing like, look, you can't just stay in this deficit in perpetuity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to find a way to kind of bounce back up to maintenance. And so tell us a little bit about like, what was the impetus around that? And what was that supposed to help you do?
Basically, it was just to get me one feeling better again, because I was starting to feel tired, but I also think I was more discouraged during that time. And I'm sure, like,
Yeah.
I make all the connections now, and I'm sure that discouragement was becoming because I was getting tired and more stressed, and my body was
Yeah.
just like kind of giving all the cues, like it's time to like give yourself some more energy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been known when people who are in a calorie deficit for so long, most of the time, adherence will start to lack up a little bit. And so that's another thing that we wondered is like, if am I actually being adherent as I first was in the beginning of the year? Probably not. And so just another reason to try to
Right.
get out of that deficit for a little bit of time, get your metabolism going back again. So
Yes.
you're able to really, it's just like, my car. I like this analogy. Like my car was on eco mode for a little while, and it's like if I need to get the car running full power again, I need to give it some more gas.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got my calories back up to probably, I think that time we got it up there on like 2,300 calories at that time.
Oh, nice.
And we finished up that. We stayed at maintenance for a little while, not as long as you normally would at maintenance, just because, I mean, and even like when I was doing that reverse diet or increasing my calories, still seeing some weight loss throughout that process, actually.
Right.
Which I think a lot of people don't realize is like when you start increasing calories, like, yes, there could be times where you're going to see a little bit of increase in the scale at that moment, just because you're putting, I like to explain to people, it's like you're putting more food into your body. So like you are going to have more weight. I like to explain to people, if you go stand on the scale and I hand you a bag of apples, it's no difference if you're holding that bag of apples in your hands or if that bag of apples is in your belly. It's the food
Right.
weight, not fat. So I like to,
That's right.
explain that way to people of like, so during this process, like I started to lose weight, but I was also, starting to level out a little bit. And once I started feeling a lot better, I started to see that like that kind of like a bigger goal in mind. And that's when I mentioned to him, I was like, hey, if we can get into another deficit in a little bit, I think I could lose 150 pounds in a year. I
Hmm.
think that would be possible. And he supported it. And he was like, let's see, because I definitely had the more weight to lose. And so we did that. And we continued we went back into the deficit. And then about around like December 18th or so, I had lost that 150 pounds.
Dude,
And
that's so cool. That's so cool. Good for you. And so this was of 2019.
yes, all this was the first year.
Amazing. Still of 2019. We're obviously in the middle of pandemic. Um, and and so from the time you started working with your coach, and you obviously started to come to the realization that, okay, it's more about calories than it's about fad dieting per se, than about
Mm-hmm.
restricting any one food group or restricting your food timing or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So you're managing your calories. You went up to a maintenance. You said 2,200 for a while. Now, within that kind of maintenance, within the second deficit, how are you structuring your nutrition in terms of like, were you making concerted efforts to eat really clean? Were you still allowing some flexibility and freedom, as I like to call it, within there? Like, what was it that you were toggling between?
Yeah. So I was trying to stick with, my coach always preached, and I think it's a very common thing. A lot of coaches, and you may tell your clients this as well, like the 80-20,
Hmm.
80% of the week or so should be, wholesome, nutritious calories, nutrient dense foods. And then, that 20% are the fun foods that, whatever you like, if I can
Yeah.
go out and have tacos with some friends. I can, I'm not much of a drinker, but if I wanted to go out and have a drink with a friend, I could do that.
Yeah.
If I wanted to have, if I'm going to a birthday party, I want to have a piece of birthday cake, I could do that. Like I started to, I learned that you can work those things in. And even when you're in a deficit, I mean, I think a lot
Yeah.
of people get stuck up of like, oh, well, if I, go over my calories one day, then, then I'm just wasting this deficit. Well, not exactly. If you're in
Hmm.
a deficit for 7 days a week and you take one day and you're at maintenance or even maybe a little above, you're
Hmm.
probably your average calories is still in a deficit. So you're not
Right.
losing any progress there. So like I started to learn more about that. And, I was definitely working, still making sure to work in the foods that I love, to really make it not feel like such a daunting and um, really discouraging process. I want to make it fun and enjoyable. That's what I was able to
Yeah,
keep this up.
and psychologically, don't you think that's a necessary component in order to be successful long term? As otherwise, especially coming from someone that's eating a lot of junk frequently and enjoys doing that, within reason. Well, it would seem to be unreasonable to try and remove all of that. Which, as coming from someone who said you've dieted plenty of times in the past, I'm sure you encountered that a number of times as well.
Because I think people tie the dieting into restriction. Like it's like people feel like those two things have to go hand in hand together. One bad day, one bad week, you're not going to lose progress. And yes, it's hard to get
Right.
past that, um, but enjoy those moments and just keep going, get back on track.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a little bit because I think that's a really important point, um, around the psychology of when you screw up, when you fail, when you eat good or bad foods. But um, so we're approaching 2020. You're down 150 pounds, and then what have the last couple years looked like for you in terms of maintaining that weight? What's gone well? What hasn't gone well? And kind of where are you now?
Yeah. So kind of hitting the highlights here. I mean, lately I've been, really focusing a lot less on the scale and what it's doing and more on what am I capable of? What achievements can I accomplish throughout this entire weight loss process. And again, it's not just really to the weight anymore. Like I could honestly could care less. And to be completely honest with you and your listeners, like I've been on a scale vacation, so to speak. Like I've just, I being someone, I mean, being a coach, yes, I understand the relationship behind the scale, but also being someone who used to be at the size I was, I still have my struggles from time to time. And so like when I find myself getting into those times where I'm struggling with the scale relationship, I just take a break from it and really just focus on all the other things and how I'm feeling, and it helps with getting through this process. But throughout this past couple of years, like I've done a couple of things. I went skydiving. I, hiked a few like incredible hiking places that I've would like, in Colorado, and like when we were in Arizona, and like a couple of these places that I would never imagine things I could do. That's what I've been trying to push for now. And that's what gives me joy now throughout this process is just what am I capable of? And each time I find myself saying like, I couldn't have done that 3 years ago. There was no way. And so that really keeps me going now. But, and then, so those are the highlights. And, and then I also should mention, as I mentioned to your listeners earlier and I do have a binge eating history. And I was having a really hard time with that last year with travel nursing. While that was amazing and I loved every bit of it, and I still love travel nursing, it's been great. I've also gotten that freedom back. And this is actually the first time I really kind of connected these 2 points. Like I know earlier I said I kind of gained that freedom when I was growing up, and that's when I found myself getting into that trouble with the binge eating. And it's almost like I've gone through that new freedom again. And that's when it really tested me. Haven't really made that connection before. So just kind of like going through that in my head right now.
Man.
But so I was really struggling with that, just while I was in Charleston and when I came out to Colorado, like all the different restaurants, all the things that are available out here. Like I want to try this, try that.
Yeah.
And it was hard. And that's when I started to find myself overeating again and then struggling with the binge eating. And, over the last month, I think today's like 31 days that I've gone now without binge eating. I've, tried to implement more things with my therapist and things that I've just continued to work on. It's a process, and you just got to take it day by day.
That's great, dude. Good for you. And such an epic journey. And I appreciate you being so candid about it, because I think it's just imperative that everyone understands that we all have our own respective struggles. And, not all of us come from the position of obviously being, overweight growing up, but nonetheless is there's plenty of us that have our own internal battles that we're fighting, and none of it from the outside in is ever as easy as it looks like it is. And so just being straightforward like that is great. With respect to, and I can appreciate you connecting the dots there around the freedom of your life and part of your journey of going to Charleston and part of your your nursing gig and then having exposure to all of these wonderful restaurants, obviously someone who enjoys food. How do you navigate that on a daily basis? Obviously someone who understands the importance of tracking and managing calories within reason. And then at the same time is you want to have flexibility and freedom with what you can eat and enjoying yourself and living your life and not being bound by the scale. What does it strategically look like, kind of from a week by week standpoint, for someone like you that wants to set themselves up for success and be able to do, eat what you want to eat within reason? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah. So I like to, one, like plan ahead. Like that's what I do most of the time. If I'm, if I know I'm going to be going out somewhere to eat, with a friend, or even if I just want to go try a new place, or, sometimes like every other week, I just like to go out and eat by myself and just, go to one of my favorite places that's in town. And I just plan that ahead. Like when I first wake up in the day, I am still counting my calories and most of the days. So like I'll get up and I'll plug that in first thing if I know I'm going to be doing that evening. That way it kind of gives me a good idea of what I have available for the rest of the day. And and then there's going to be times where you just have to just like really just learn to accept, like, not every week's going to be perfect. Not every day is going to be perfect. And, really just trying to provide structure. Like if you're not able to, like, there's like, I'll use this as an example. I just got back from a retreat in Florida this past weekend, and I I had been tracking for a while, especially since December 19th when I started haven't been binge eating since then. I really got back on the track with tracking and watching my calories, protein, such. And then when I went to Florida, I told my coach, I was like, I'm going to take this time off of tracking, but I'm going to set new expectations for myself. Instead of tracking, I'm going to stick with 3 meals a day, no snacking in between, a
Yep.
protein, some type of fruit or vegetable with every meal. Drinking lots of water. I didn't get to go work out while I was down there. I just focused on we went for plenty of walks throughout that time. Setting, if the bar is up here, for those of you listening, like my hands up high, really high up above me, and you're going to be going somewhere where you can't reach that bar, don't just throw the bar out the window. Just lower it a little bit. If you lower it a little bit, you're going to be just fine.
Right. Yeah, just setting realistic expectations and saying, look, you don't have to track every morsel of food that goes in, but there's some fundamental, as we call them, pillars. There's foundational principles at place around movement, around calorie intake, around protein intake, around just fiber, volume of food, meal frequency, right? All of those types of things that are paramount that I think requires a reasonable level of commitment. And at no point are you saying, screw it. I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want to do because I deserve to, because, whatever, just because I want to. And instead saying, you know what, I'm taking responsibility for my actions. And just because I'm not going to track, and acknowledging and accepting I don't have to track everything, I can still be successful. I can still maintain, I can still make progress depending on the person, right? Exactly. I can really appreciate that thought process because it's so necessary for people that perhaps don't want to, don't like to, or refuse to track for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, you can be successful without tracking. I mean, but I like the way that my coach explained it to me when I first started tracking is like, it's like trying to ride a bike. The tracking is like those training wheels for the first little bit. Like most kids can't hop on a bike the first time without training wheels and just take off and not, crash every time they move. So like you start with the training wheels or the tracking, you get really good at that. All right. You take the tracking away, you take the training wheels off a little bit. Okay. You crash a couple of times. You put the training wheels back on to get used to it again. And you just keep building up that learning and that skill of being able to not use the training wheels or not use the tracking as much, and to be able to eventually, go without the training wheels or go without tracking. But you also always have those in your back pocket if you need them.
No, that's great. And, what I'm hearing you say is so much around listening to your body and your lifestyle and kind of observing how you're feeling at the given time, and then making, kind of determining what's going to make the most sense for you at that given time. Is to say, you know what, I feel like I'm getting a little too lost in scale weight, or I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed with the tracking process. I want to have, and I'm accepting that with more flexibility and freedom, perhaps the scale's not going to move at all. Perhaps it's going to go in the opposite direction. And I'm totally okay with that because these are the realistic expectations that I've set for myself, which I think is so important for people to allow to take place instead of just this rigidity around once I lose it, it has to stay off. Otherwise, I'm cheating. I'm not successful. I'm a failure. Right? All of these things that these stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, it's so tough because I mean I get both sides of it, and I've had the struggles, but it's like, but I think this new mindset of thinking this way is what has been different from now compared to every other year when I've tried to keep this weight off, and I felt like it's either restriction, no junk food, exercising every day, like this, like everything's black and white, versus like if you live in that gray area for most of the time, you're going to do just fine.
Yeah. And that's it. And I think that what I've observed and experienced with coaching clients for a long time now, and certainly going through my own personal struggles as well early on in my career, of being too rigid, of being too polarizing, too black and white, is the longer you make these observations and start to acknowledge what works well for you and what doesn't, the more obviously intuitive you can be about it, the more in tune you get with your body, and the more you can give yourself permission to start to focus on just the process, just the
Mm-hmm.
behaviors, just the things that you know can help you continue to make progress that don't revolve around tracking and scale weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I heard you say, as you're starting to get focused more on performance related goals, right? On doing just fun things, on accomplishing certain hikes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being physically active. And for a lot of clients, we talk about certain performance metrics in the gym and
Mm-hmm.
saying, listen, if we can shift the focus around you just putting the effort into performing well, fueling yourself around your workouts before and after and during, and pushing hard during your workouts and making sure you're recovering effectively, right? By virtue of doing all of those things, well, the body composition is going to take care of itself,
Exactly.
right? And that's one of those things that we definitely start to observe over time and align with, because kind of this law of diminishing returns around the trade-offs of how restrictive do you need to be? How long are you willing to do that? How shredded do you need to get, right, for the
Mm-hmm.
average person? And so often there's this tipping point of, right, it's like, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, but I'm also sacrificing along the way. And there comes a point where it's like, I just don't want to have to sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
more, and the perception around the goal is just not worth it, right? And it's finding that tipping point for all of us, I think, is paramount. Wouldn't you
Yes.
agree?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. If you're living too far onto either side, that's when you're going to get into trouble. It's like just, and you don't always have to be dead center. Like there's going to be times that ebb and flow, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that it's necessary,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
this is one of the things we talk about frequently within our coaching program, is having seasons of nutrition, right? It's this
Yes.
whole idea around nutritional periodization. It's saying, look, we are not going to diet in perpetuity. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be times where it's going to be appropriate and necessary for us to be in perhaps an aggressive dieting phase. But
Mm-hmm.
then we need to focus on times of maintenance. Maybe we need to focus on times of surplus.
Mm-hmm.
When is that going to be appropriate for you? And how do we embrace that and help you understand that um, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't telling you to expect that weight is going to fluctuate, that you're not going to hit your leanest and stay there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things that are actually part of the real world struggle.
Exactly.
So, with that said, do you ever go into effort mode? Do you ever have, and I'm assuming you do, as we all do, but do you ever have kind of meals that are just like, I totally blew it on that one? And what's the thought process around how you approach those, how you overcome those?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And that's something I've been working on this past month. And, thankfully as I mentioned earlier, I've been a month without any of those moments. Just because I've been able to control so I like to, and I was just having a conversation with my coach today. When I talk about binge eating, I'm not saying sticking to my calories 100% of the time. Like when I went to Florida, I didn't track, but every decision I made while I was down there was a conscious decision. At no point did I say, F it, or did I
Mm.
just, lose control.
Mm-hmm.
That's my big thing. Is like what differentiates, just overeating, like just eating more calories than you're allotted for a day, or binge eating, is that sense of control. And,
Mm-hmm.
throughout this entire time, I had control. I was, deciding, yes, I want that, instead of just saying, oh, heck with the rest of the tonight. I'm just going to go haywire and order everything off the menu and drink until I'm, drunk as a skunk.
Right.
I wasn't focused on doing that. I was really focused on like, what can I do to keep control of this situation in the environment that I'm in? And but prior to that, when I was really struggling, yeah, I had those moments all the time. And it took a little while to get used. Like, we talk about, don't get stuck in that guilt, then restrict cycle.
Right.
It's an endless cycle. It's a very nasty cycle. And I've been stuck in it many times myself. You restrict, 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 restrict. I don't need that. Oh, I can do without that. I don't
Hmm.
want that. Or, oh, I can't make that work my calories.
Or
You just,
that's bad. I should
yes,
avoid that.
exactly. You just keep getting stuck in that momentum of all that until you hit that breaking point where you binge.
Right.
And then you feel guilty because of that binge. Oh, I just ruined all my progress. I knew I couldn't do this. All that negative self talk starts coming up. And then you go back to restricting as a result of the guilt. It's like,
Right.
oh, well, now I have to, no more cookies, no more alcohol.
Hmm.
I have to go do lots of exercise tomorrow because I ate like a fool yesterday.
Right.
And that cycle just keeps going. And so you have to almost sometimes like kind of feed into that, not letting yourself restrict and give yourself what you want sometimes, even if that means going over calories, which I think a lot of people don't understand. And once you're able to do that a few times, you start to realize how it makes you feel. Maybe I don't want to eat that much all the time because I know it makes me feel good. It doesn't make me feel good. But
Yeah.
you have to get out of that cycle and start letting go of that guilt when you do have those moments. I talk to a lot of my clients about that, finding that balance between grit and grace, finding that grit inside of you when you really want, maybe you do want that, the cookies that somebody brought into work, but you really don't want them deep down. You just feel like, oh, she brought them in, so I need to have one.
Hmm.
Okay. Maybe it's, you need to have that little bit of grit to say, no, like, I really don't want that. So I'm not going to waste, the calories just to eat that just because, you
Right.
know, but then also you need to have the grace is just as important. So that day, if you do overeat, and maybe eat 5 or 6 of those cookies, don't beat yourself up. It's okay. We're human. We're going to screw up. I still
Yes.
screw up. But you need to have that grace sometimes to allow yourself to get through those moments and say, I'm human. Yes, I enjoyed the cookies. Okay, great. Now what am I going to do for that next meal to get right back on track?
Hmm. Definitely. And I can appreciate that the logic around having grit, having grace, and acknowledging when you quote unquote screw up. And, what I would kind of assert is that it's not even a screw up. It's like,
No.
look, this is ingrained in our psyche, in our
Mm-hmm.
physiology to search out and hunt for these sugars and high calorie foods that are going to light up our brain and tell us that, we're going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's almost like we have to acknowledge that these things are going to happen to some degree. But what I heard you say that I think really resonates is it's sort of just perpetually training yourself to create more awareness around when these things happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sort of asserting some what I call logic and reason between the stimulus and the response, right? Of saying, look, I walked into the break room, the cookies are sitting right there. Before I even knew what was happening, I already ate 2 of them, and sort of looking looking backwards and saying, whoa, 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 like what just happened? How can I do better next time? What was the stimulus? What was my ingrained response? How
Mm-hmm.
does that behavior perpetuate itself in other areas of my life? Right? When I get home from work and I'm starving, I just turn right to the pantry and I start, pounding the crackers and the chips, or when I drink without thinking while I'm cooking dinner, or, on the weekends when I'm around certain people, it just
Mm-hmm.
becomes automatic. But when we can start to identify more awareness around those situations, when we can create space between the stimulus and the response, and we can insert, as one of my mentors, Dr. Kashi, says, when we can start to insert some logic and some reason to say, is this something that I want right now? Is this
Mm-hmm.
something that I plan for? If not, what can I do differently? And I think, as it sounds like you're continuing to learn and grow from, as we all do, is the more times we go through these exposures and learn from the quote unquote mistakes, the more we can start to understand our behaviors, the more we can start to change our behaviors, and the more we can start to change those feedback loops around stimulus, right? The cookie, eat the cookie. No, the cookie, back away, go for a walk, right? Go do something else, right? All of those usual ingrained behaviors that we find ourselves in. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things as it pertains to the I screwed up. I ate a meal that was off plan. I ate way too much. Now I'm going to feel guilty. You know what? That's not serving you. What would be
Mm-hmm.
serving you is how can I learn and grow from this opportunity? Right?
Yeah.
What did I do? Why did I do it? Who was I with? What was the situation? And what can I do differently and perhaps better next time? And even start to, as you said, like start to plan for some of these things in the mix. So psychologically, right, we don't have to feel restricted all the time, which is when we do end up probably screwing up the most. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. And actually, it's funny you mentioned, the examples you were talking about with like the creating that space between the stimulus and the response. That's something that I've been working on. And actually, just to kind of give an example for with getting through my binge eating episodes that I've been having, and this past month, one thing I implemented was I identified one of my biggest area weaknesses was right after a 12-hour shift at work. I was stressed, I was tired, I was hungry because most of the time I wasn't getting a break.
Yep.
And I just didn't even want to think about going home. Even if I had dinner ready in the fridge, I just had to heat it up. I didn't even think about heating it up. My brain was like, stop on the way home, get some junk food. That'll, get that dopamine hit, get you feeling better since you had a stressful day. Like I deserved, quote unquote, that junk food because I had a stressful day at work. And so I had to create that space, or I like to call it, create that barrier to the impulse, creating impulse control. And one thing that I did is I have you ever heard of like, my therapist is the one that taught me this, and I don't know if you've heard this or not, like putting sticky notes of like affirmations up around like the house. That way you see them and read them throughout the day. Well, I kind of took that, but then I also integrated it into this, what I'm getting ready to talk about. And I took a sticky note and I put it on my dash of my car, and it says, think long-term.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been many a nights where I've gotten off of work and I've gotten sat in the car and I'm like, all right, where am I going for this junk food now? Because like there's a grocery store on the way home. And I would just sit there for a moment and I'd look and I'd see that sticky note sitting on my dash. And I'd say, think long-term. What do I really want right now? Do I really want that junk food now? Or do I want the results that I've been wanting later on?
Yeah.
And so and there was literally sometimes I would sit and stare at that note for like 2 or 3 minutes before I would leave the parking lot, convincing myself, go home, eat the food that you already have prepared for you when you get home. You just got to get home, throw it in the microwave. Like it's there.
Right.
And just creating that, it takes the unconscious thoughts and makes them conscious, which is my biggest thing for me. Is like, I need to create that barrier that says, hey, stop. And, I'm waving my hand in front of my face. Like, stop what you're doing right now and think. Mm-hmm. Think out loud if you have to. And, so there's sometimes I'm going home, literally, it's like on the way home, just kind of saying to myself, think long-term. What do you really want? And, I'm just going through that, thankfully I live like 3 minutes away from the hospital, but like, it gets me home, and then I'm, back into my normal routine.
Just creating that space, dude, is pivotal. And it's identifying the trigger and then helping change the outcome, helping change the response. And I'm in the same boat as you, where we're in the middle of we're running a 21-day no alcohol challenge. Mm. For me, I'm going on about the day after Christmas. And I don't, it's not like I drink a ton anyways, but it's definitely one of those things that's a slippery slope for me of it could very well be a daily basis, especially like a long day. I work a lot and I work hard, and, a long day of, being on the phone with clients and doing work and I come out, and cause I work from home as many of us do. And kids are home from school and it's chaotic, and it's just like, kind of unthinkingly pour a glass of wine or have a cocktail or a beer or something. And so it's the same deal, man. I do have, some of those signals, right? To be present, to be aware, And one of my things is to quote unquote show up. And I even have it as the screensaver on my phone is when I keep looking at you, show up. Who am I showing up for? I'm showing up for myself. I'm showing up for my wife. I'm showing up for my family. And that comes with certain ingrained behaviors
Yep.
that I need to embody. And me pouring a drink every single day doesn't represent the type of person that I'm trying to be
Hmm.
for myself, for them. And so I can appreciate you sharing that, and I think that it's obviously so relevant for all of us. For any of you listening, is how are you showing up for yourself? How are you showing up for the people that you care about and that care about you? Because it is your responsibility to
Hmm.
show up for yourself so that you can care for them in the way that they deserve. And I think that, all of this comes back to how we're managing our life, our lifestyle, our nutrition, our exercise habits,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. So, Chase, man, such a great conversation. So fun catching up with you. It's great to see you again. Tell us, and I want to respect your time and let you go. Tell us where people can find out more about you.
Yeah. So I am on Instagram at changing_chase. Same username for on TikTok, and then I'm
Perfect.
also you can find me on Facebook, Chase Smith. I also have Chasing Health with Chase Smith as my free Facebook group. Love you have it in there. And then yeah, if anyone's interested in one-on-one coaching, just reach out to me, send me a message. Always happy to help, or even if you just want to just chat and I can answer your
Beautiful.
questions, help for you. But thank you for having me on, man. It's been great catching up.
Dude, absolute pleasure. So we'll have all of those links in the show notes, guys, for anyone listening. If you're catching this in the Facebook group, do me a favor and leave a comment for Chase. Let us know how much you enjoyed this episode. Give us a heart, high five. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments so Chase can jump in and respond to you and or privately DM you. Chase, anything else that you wanted to leave our listeners with? Before we head out?
Trust the process. That's been what's honestly kept me going throughout this entire thing. You know,
Hmm.
I even have a friend got me a mug with that on it. It says trust the process because
Yeah,
guys, there's gonna be a lot of good days, but there's gonna be just as many bad days. Don't let those define you. Consistent action leads to consistent results. Trust the
that's it.
process.
You said it best, brother. All right, appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. I will catch up with you later.
You too. Talk to you later, man.